Alright, so I decided to do one more quick little tutorial here. This one's using an LED and using a motion sensor. So this is our kit for today. This will be available on our webpage as a kit that you see right here. We have our motion sensor, we have our resistor, we have our Trinket with its rail, 2 leads, and a LED. So let's get started with this right away. Basically, if you haven't seen our first tutorial on how to wire our Trinket up here, maybe I'll put a link to it in the description of this video, but we're gonna actually go right to our Trinket that we built in that one where we soldered our rails in. So that's what it looks like after it's done. So let's just move this stuff out of the way. So basically we're going to put our Trinket down into our breadboard. We are going to grab our motion sensor. So our motion sensor, you can see it's got positive, negative, out. So this is our positive, this is our negative, and that is our out. So what we're going to do is we are going to put this into our breadboard, but what I've had to do in this is I actually built one up, and I can actually go through on how to solder this up, but what I did is I've got a little piece of board here and soldered into it. So I soldered some scrap Cat 5 that I had laying around onto this board here. So my blue is my positive, my brown is my connects to the Trinket, and that's my negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 5 volts on the Trinket, which is right here, and then I am going to go to my ground, which is right here, and then I'm going to put our send signal, or PIR, to number 2. Alright, so on this one here, what I've done is my negative is over here. My part that talks to the Arduino, the center here, is this brown one, and then my negative, or my negative is over here, negative positive is over here. So basically that is what we've got. Okay. Now I've got some pretty stiff wire here, just so it will make it kind of stand up. Alright, so let's grab our LED. We'll put our LED, remember, positive, negative for our LED. The longest one is always your positive, shortest one is always your negative. Put that in. Grab our resistor, just so it doesn't shoot full 5 volts through it. Put that, our resistor in. Grab our jumpers. We're going to run one jumper from our ground to our ground on our LED, and then we are going to go to channel 1, because in our script channel 1 is going to actually be our send for our LED, which I'm going to put over there, so it goes, power goes up here into our resistor, into our LED, and then back to ground. So basically that is our wiring. Alright, just like so. Okay, so now we're going to bring up our, oh, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to bring up a new one of these. There we go. I'm just going to make this window small. Okay. Let's make this nice and big. Oh. Let's make this nice and big. So on how to set up your Trinket, we're kind of in our second video here, so if you are kind of wondering how to set up your Trinket and all that, please watch our very first tutorial that we did, and we explain how to set up the Trinket, solder it, and make a blinking light. So you may want to go back to that. Like I say, I'll put a link to that in our description. Alright, so in our code here, what we want to do is we want to, at the very top, we want to go like this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut and paste, and then you guys can pause the video and write this down, or go to our blog on our webpage, yotvOnline, and I'll have this code in there. So basically what we've got here, let's just bring this back here. So on our first int, we're setting up, basically what we're doing is we're setting the pins up here. So int LED pin equals 1. So pin LED pin is 1, so that's number 1 on the board, so which is our LED. Our int input, which is what our motion sensor is sending to our Trinket, is pin 2. Our PIR state is low, and we're going to set a value, or int value of 0. That's what the value for reading the pin state is, I've put there. Alright, so in our void setup, make some space here. This is where we're going to set our pins for if they're inputs or outputs, as I was explaining in our last video. In this one, we finally have an input and an output. So our pin mode, we set our pin mode to LED output. That declares the output of the LED. Our pin mode input is input, declares the sensor as an input. So this will now send instead of the board sending to it. Alright. So let's go here. Let's make a couple spaces there. Alright, so now in our void setup, we'll go like this. Oh, I'm just going to copy the code over that I built up. We'll paste that in there. There we go. So now our variable is a digital read input pin, reads the value. If the value is high, so if the motion sensor is tripped, then what it's going to do is it's going to make the LED turn on. And then if there's no motion, it's going to set the motion sensor, or no, else it's going to set the motion sensor low. So we have an else statement here. So if none of this is true, it's going to switch to else, and then it's going to digital write low. If this is high, so what it's doing in these ones too, in these is this high and low, or if the state here, sorry, if the state is low, it'll set it to high. If it has no motion and the LED and the sensor is high, it's going to set it to low. So that's basically turning it off or on, waiting for more motion. So what we want to do is we want to check our code. I've already saved this one, so I'm just going to save it as that. And I think our code should have no error, and it doesn't. If you have an error, again, check over your code, make sure it's exactly the way I have it here. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go and plug in our this in. Alright, and we're going to hit the read button and we're going to write. We're going to write to it. Alright, so it wrote to it successfully. So now when I put my hand over the motion here, well, I moved it. So now if I go like this, it sense motion. So the light goes on. If I don't move for a second, see, there's no motion. Now if I move, so there you go. That is a cheap motion sensor. Now you could set this up, wire in a relay, which we're going to start doing a little bit more of fancier stuff, and we're going to start putting relays in and making it either take pictures with cameras, turn on lights, whatever you want to do. What I'm going to actually do in one of our tutorials, if I can find it here, I'm going to set up a Raspberry Pi. This is basically going to be one of our motion sensors. I'm going to set up a camera as a trigger. The next one, I'm going to wire these babies in. And these are basically remote controls. They've got pins here. So what I can do is I can set up a pin on a Raspberry Pi as a receiver. And this can be in our motion sensor. And what it'll do is if it senses motion, it will send, instead of turning a blue light on, it'll actually send a signal to here, which will go wirelessly to this one, to our Raspberry Pi, in a little security system that I've built up and been modifying for years. So this is basically a wireless transmitter receiver, so I can have multiple motion sensors or whatever I want, triggers of some sort to go off. So we'll get into that one later on, but there you go. Once again, if you like what you see here, put some comments below. If there's something you want to see, definitely put it below, because this is what I do. And once again, check out our webpage. Have a good day, and thanks for checking us out.